Good morning. It is Tuesday, March 5th, and this is the Finance and Administration Committee meeting for Ottawa County. First on the agenda is public comment. Please come to the podium, address the chair only. You have 3 minutes to speak, and thank you. Oh, please announce your jurisdiction or where you vote, and all comments come to me.
My name is David Barnowski, and I vote in Port Sheldon Township. And I object to the fact that the public comments on the YouTube video are not enabled. Mr. Epperson could change that, I believe. Second, I have yet to figure out how the agenda of the Ottawa Impact Commissioners is advanced by the way they put the different funds together so that it forced the elimination of the food coordinator, while at the same time they said that they did not want the food coordinator eliminated. We saw over the different months, we saw different attempts by Mr. Zylstra to restore the funding for a coordinator. We saw people say we didn't want that position eliminated. And we've seen the public health department staff say that by the way that things are structured, they were not able to restore it. We saw Mr. Gibbs say, yes, they were. We saw them say, no, they weren't. We saw people come in and ask for that money to be restored. And we've seen no action by the Ottawa Impact commissioners to restore that position. It's not on the agenda today. When are you going to undo the damage you have caused? You created the conditions that caused that position to go unfilled. Please restore that position.
Thank you.
Derek Mullenberg, Holland Township. So my commissioner, Jacob Bonema, was censured by you guys, admonished, just, taken out into the hall and said, I can't believe you would make these allegations against Mr. Gibbs. Fast forward, we now have you guys saying, well, maybe, Mr. Gibbs wasn't the best fit, but I've heard nothing about the way that you treated all of District 4. You removed him from the committee. He used to be vice chair. I'm glad that it's humorous to you, Mr. Moss. Apologies are free. Cost you no money, no budget line items. It's just the right thing to do. I'm not asking you to put him back on the committee, but it's a slap in the face to people of Zeeland.
Mr. Mullenberg, all of our committees were restructured at the beginning of this fiscal year. I'm sorry, this year.
I don't have any more time, I don't think, do I?
No, you're fine. You're fine. I'm just going to let you know that they were all restructured. We have smaller numbers on our board.
I don't feel that it prevents you from apologizing for his censure and removal.
Thank you.
Dina Arner, Holland Township. That's very disingenuous of you to say, oh, the boards were all restructured. They were restructured to allow Mr. Bonema, Mr. Zylstra, and Mr. Bergman to each have a place on one single board. How many boards are you on, Commissioner Cosby? 4, 5? That certainly sounds equitable to me. It must be some of that fancy new math where 1 is the same as 5. And that's your idea of equitable distribution and equitable representation for all the residents of Ottawa County. But I guess everybody isn't equal in Ottawa County, unless maybe some people are more equal than others. And that's the way you like to run things here. I second Mr. Bronowski's request that you finally find time to consider putting aside a little bit of money for the Ottawa County Food Coordinator. I realized that poor people with no food in their mouths are not nearly as sexy as veterans, because you seem to have an unlimited purse when it comes to putting new people in the Veterans Department, where there's not even been any request to have more people there, where there hasn't even been any study to show that we need more people there. But boy, you feel patriotic putting more people, helping more veterans, while you let children in Ottawa County go without food. But I guess that's what passes for patriotism these days.
Thank you.
Karen Obitz, Spring Lake. Just want to add my voice to those already brought here to this podium this morning about the desire for transparency in terms of re-enabling the public commentary on the YouTube channel for these meetings. I'd also like to reiterate the repeated requests that we, or many of us, have made, that your consistent behavior in terms of funding what you believe is important includes the reinstatement of a coordinator with adequate funding for Ottawa Foods. What I guess I'm asking for is some sort of semblance of consistency with what you say you stand for and actual concrete action, because I'll tell you what it looks like from my perspective. You are behaving in a very transparent manner, but it does not match your stated values. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there other public comments? Seeing none, we will move on. And do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Is there any discussion? I think we need to amend to add a couple of items, and that would be, I need some help with the verbiage here to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners. Spencer, would you mind coming up? These were late items. Yeah. Okay, but. Pardon me.
Actually, I wanted to see if we could amend it to add a discussion item.
Okay,
Okay.
so, okay, Spencer, I'm gonna need your help with verbiage when this comes up again. I haven't done it before, so I apologize.
Should I be seated again?
Yeah, go ahead
Okay.
and sit down.
All right, I'll be
It's
back.
on me. So, okay,
Want me to move to add an item?
yes, please.
And what is the topic?
Tires, removal of tires.
Okay. So I guess I'd move to add item 8 for contract regarding tires. Anything else?
And then also water inspection.
And to also add an item number 9 for regarding water inspection.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. All those, oh, sorry. I
Handle-
apologize, and you would like to amend the
Yes,
agenda
I
as
would.
well?
Yeah,
Can we-
handle the current one first.
Please.
Sorry, this is something I haven't done before, so I apologize. So yes, we have a second, and all those in favor to amend the agenda as stated, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. And Ms. Curran,
Can we add a discussion item to address the food coordinator and get an update on where we're at and what we're waiting on and to move that forward? I know there's been a lot of discussion around that from the community. So I'm moving that we add a discussion item for the food coordinator under discussion and adding a second point there.
okay, do I have a second?
Would you like a second? I think this item was coming up in the next meeting, but
I think it's something that we've discussed before. Do I have a second?
I would second it if the chair would like me to, but it wasn't on this agenda and I thought it wasn't going to be on this agenda.
Correct, I don't think there's been a change in status.
Okay, then I will not second it yet.
Being no second, the motion fails. Moving on. We have consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes from February 6, 2024? Finance and Administration Committee meeting.
So moved.
Support.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
And opposed, same sign. The motion passes. Moving on to agenda and action requests. And number one is statement of review. Do I have a motion to approve the statement of review?
So moved.
Support.
Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we can go to, since it has numbers, go to a roll call vote.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Wenzel. Yes. Ms. Cosby.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. Moving on to action item number 2, accounts payable for January 29th, 2024 through February 23rd, 2024. The suggested motion is to approve general claims in the amount of $19,109,990.54 as presented by the summary report for January 29th, 2024 through February 23rd, 2024. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll go to a roll call vote.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Wenzel. Yes. Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. Moving on to action item number 3, it's for public service contract. The suggested motion is to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners a contract with for public services. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Is there discussion? Seeing none, we'll go to a roll call vote.
Mrs. Wenzel. Yes. Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. Moving on to action item or agenda item number 4, resolution to authorize qualifying statements for bonding purposes. The suggested motion is to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners the resolution to authorize certification of qualifying statements for bonding purposes. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Do we want to have some discussion in around qualifying statements? No, Karen, would you mind just kind of explaining?
This is an annual filing with the state that we do every year that if there's a bond issue, you're required to have certain information on file, your debt limit and other things like that, the outstanding issues. So for the county purposes, I'm not aware of any bonds for 2024. However, public utilities may have a project, depending, or it's just really, we file it every year, whether we have a bond issue or not, because sometimes a refunding may come up or there might be some other opportunity and you always want to have it on file.
Yeah, so normal course of business.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mhm.
All right, we'll go ahead and go to a vote to approve the qualifying statement or authorizing qualifying statements for bonding purposes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mrs. Wenzel. Yes. Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby.
Yes,
Motion passes.
thank you. And next up on the agenda is Veterans Affairs. We have Jason here. The motion is to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners a proposal to add 1 full-time FTE and benefited to it as an administrative assistant position at a universal pay grade of 7 for a total cost of $97,211. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second? Hi,
Morning.
Jason. How are you?
Well,
So would you mind discussing or telling us about this particular position, just briefly?
Sure. So initially, it is really to provide additional coverage for the department. As we all know, I'm the only full-time employee, so there's no time off, there's no vacation, there's no sick days. So Initially, this individual would be cross-trained to help me with the day-to-day operational coverage of the department. It's also going to be a hybrid role. Well, they'll have a case management as well, where they can help with our committee funds, our emergent funding, our funeral funds, and helping schedule transportation for our veterans that need to get to medical appointments. And on that note, they'll also help with budgeting, planning, and special events and projects, as we have some new events that are coming up this summer that I will need some assistance with.
Excellent. Now, did you have, you've already had, have you had this position kind of written up and you're ready to post it, or do you have any candidates in mind for it?
It has not been posted, but it's been written up. Yes.
Okay, prepared for posting. So purpose of the FTE you just explained, and it's new work for your department,
Yes,
correct?
ma'am.
And you don't have any budgeted staff. I'm going through a list of questions I'm going to ask later too for others. So you don't have current staff. This is your opportunity to get current staff. And number of FTEs budgeted for your department right now, do you know offhand?
It
It's
would
just
this,
you?
this,
This would be the one,
Yeah.
yeah. So, and would this be funded through the general fund, grant, or other
general fund.
general? And you won't be able to pull anything down to replace, and will this position be filled with an internal or external candidate
To be determined.
to be determined?
Mhm.
So do you start with internal first and then move on to external?
Correct.
Okay. All right. That's all the questions I have of Jason. Anybody else have questions? This is a new position. He's building out his department. Yeah, that's kind of step one. So, yes, I'm sorry.
Sure. Sure.
Moss.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm just wondering about the difference between like administrative and clerical work versus some of the other things that you'll need done, like what the balance might be, or kind of what you foresee the person doing. I know you briefly mentioned it, but could you kind of add any other detail?
Sure. Yeah, clarify that a little bit more for me.
Is it just clerical work that you're looking for this position, or is there additional planning, support, strategy, other things like that as the department's getting off the ground?
Yes. So this individual, this position will be my right hand, strategically running the day-to-day operation of the department. They will have the ability to also be forward operating in the community as well. So when we do, as an example, we have a veteran resource fair that will take place in August. They will have the ability to be forward facing with the public.
Mhm.
A big part of that planning will be accomplished by this individual as well. The coordinating of all the efforts that will go into bringing in nonprofits and for-profits and other county departments in to help with those resources. So they eventually will be an accredited veteran service officer as well, just for knowledge base to be able to help veterans as well. So hopefully that answered your question, but it's going to be my right, the next person that will be running the show if I'm not there.
That's very helpful. I guess in general, if this person does become a VSO in the future, does that also possibly indicate a need for a pay raise and different things like that? Or vested
Correct.
responsibilities?
Yeah, so that's a
Okay.
discussion that I've had with HR. And other counties initially start some of their full-time employees in a role similar to this. And as they earn their accreditation, that changes their ability and their education, and that would we would look at a promotional opportunity for that.
Okay.
So there would be some growth in this role
Okay.
in the future.
That makes sense to me, and it kind of helps to know that it's also going to be forward facing. It's going to be a lot of coordinating and things like that. It's not just behind a desk or in an office, probably be in the community some as well.
Roger that. And it
Okay.
gives me the ability to really strategically plan and start looking at what we're doing. Calendar, we're getting into budget season,
Right.
you know, the things that we're doing as a director, the other things that I have responsibilities for. This will give me the opportunity to really focus on growing and providing the best resources for our veterans, But in order to do that, I have to have the time to strategically plan and communicate and make those things happen. So.
It's the last thing I would just mention or highlight is that a connection with armed forces, is preferred for this position. So as people are interested, that is kind of a priority. Yeah,
That's correct.
and thank you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Commissioner Curran,
I'm good.
you're good?
No, I shouldn't.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, thank you very much, Jason.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to go to a roll call vote for to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners a proposal to add one full-time FTE benefited administrative assistant at a universal pay grade of 7 for the total cost of $97,211.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mrs. Wenzel. Yes. Ms. Cosby.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is an environmental health personnel request. The suggested motion is to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners the request from Public Health to add one full-time FTE, and it's Administrative Assistant 2, a position cost of $85,602. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second. And discussion. And Spencer. Good
Happy to
morning.
answer.
You're
Good
back
morning.
again.
Here I am
Back
again.
Thank
Good
you.
to see you all.
Yes. Well, I'm going to walk you through kind of what I just did. So rationale, and is this a new or a replacement FTE?
This will be new.
New.
Mhm.
And then reason or purpose of this FTE?
It's largely to split off some of the duties that have kind of, as our services have kind of diversified over time and got more complex with emerging issues like PFAS contamination and things like that. We're looking for someone to help kind of manage some of the day-to-day things to free up the supervisors to focus on these more elaborate program area things that require our attention. In addition, Kim Walters, our sustainability supervisor, is currently not only doing these 4 remote site supervision, but supervising our clerical support staff, environmental health. And we're looking to have someone who's present in the office to oversee that work. And that's also able to slip in and substitute when we're short-staffed, which happens from time to time. We currently covered things like that with supervisors or field staff will often step in to sit up there, but it kind of takes them away from their day-to-day work of issuing permits and things like that and slows us down. So we're hoping to kind of ease some of those concerns that we have internally as well.
Okay, and is this new work then for your department, or what I'm hearing is that it's kind of new and old?
It's kind of pulling bits and pieces from different people's job duties and putting it on this one dedicated person.
And so can current budgeted staff do the work?
I'm sorry.
Can current budgeted staff do the work? And if no, why?
Yeah, it's just been a struggle. I mean, we've gotten by. It's just far from ideal, and we feel like this will add a lot of efficiency. We have some additional funding that's been made available from the state focused on environmental health work this year. And we sat down and kind of strategized on what would help our department as a whole within environmental health, knowing that these are dedicated funds for like well and septic permitting and food safety activities. Rather than hiring or jumping right into like hiring field staff, we were looking more like holistically at one small move that could help everybody add some efficiency to their work. And we think that this will get us there.
Okay, and do you know what your department's current number of FTEs, this particular department's FTEs are budgeted off the top of your head?
Total, I believe it's about 28.
And the department, and that's budgeted and currently hired, do you know?
We are fully staffed right now.
You're at
Mhm.
28, so it's a new position completely. Yep. And then how will this position be funded? General fund, grant, other?
I don't know. Karen,
Grant.
if I can pull up
Is this a
fiscal.
grant?
It is ELPHS funding that dedicated funding that we received from the state. We were allocated a larger amount for this year and going forward. That's that amount that we didn't know about when we went into the budgeting season. So this is kind of what transpired in like November-ish, we were like, we have this extra money and we're gonna have this money going forward. It's dedicated to food safety and well and septic permitting type activities. How can we best use this to improve our service delivery?
And do you expect that this FTE will be filled with an internal or external candidate? Do you have somebody in mind?
To be determined. I mean, our preference would be maybe that someone internally that has the knowledge of our department, the inner workings of like our local codes and things that are unique to Ottawa, that has some experience there. So it could be either or, but until we post it and see who applies, I guess. No one specifically.
No one specifically yet. Okay. And do you know, is your FY24 budget on target?
I believe so. Yeah, we're doing pretty well. Actually, we've had an unusual amount of turnover like in the last few months, which actually has put us in a good, I think, position. Kind of new hires are paid less than more senior people. And we've had some people move on to different other areas working for the state and things like that. So we're coming in pretty healthy, especially with our current salary line area. So I think even in the current condition, I think due to that, we have more than enough to cover this in this fiscal year.
Thank you.
I don't know, again, if Karen wants to speak to any of that. We're fine. Okay. Okay.
You think you said fine? Good.
Okay.
Good. Thank you. Are there other questions?
Sure.
Mr. Moss?
Sure. Well, I don't know if it's as much as a question, but maybe just more discussion on this one. So I had some time to kind of look through it, and I think I understand the desire for efficiency, to improve service delivery, things like that. So I actually support that. But I think we should take a different route with this item. What I did is I went back and I looked at the environmental health regulations that do kind of make Ottawa sort of unique. And I think Ottawa is one of just a couple counties in the state that does that, or has a specific regulation on things that are related to like well and septic sale, transfer permits and things like that, and the related inspections.
Our real estate point of time of sale program, looking at the well and septic prior to
Yeah.
sale, is I wouldn't say it's completely unique to Ottawa. I mean, it's the full gamut across the state of different types of scenarios, I guess.
Yeah.
We are slightly unique, I would say, though.
Yeah. And so I think what I would like to see happen before it moves forward is we send this over to HHS and kind of review some of the policy, some of the ordinance that requires the health department to, manage some of the transfer fees and things like that. Because I think there's a possibility we could rely a little more on the private market to handle some of these items that would possibly kind of be almost like a release valve on the department. Right now, all of those sale and transfer inspections are done only by our health department, and other counties allow independent private inspectors to do that type of work. So what I'm wondering is, if we send this to HHS for a little bit more work, could we do something that is maybe a little more similar to other counties and allow either the health department and private entities or other inspectors to handle some of this work and take some of the workload off of the department in general? So that's kind of my first thought. And I think part of it would be looking at the specific regulation for real estate evaluations and seeing if we were to make changes there, could it free up time in the department? Could it reduce some of the workload maybe? But that would require a bunch of discussion. But one thing I think is, we could keep allocating FTEs into the department, but I think there might be a better way to do it.
Is there further discussion?
That almost sounded like a motion, Joe.
I'd be happy to make a motion. My motion would be to forward this item to HHS to review the environmental health regulations. Yep.
So you want to forward to HHS the environmental health personnel request.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, but to review the environmental health regulations.
That in a motion, so. All right, the motion is to forward to HHS to review the environmental health regulations and this personnel request.
Yep.
And so do I have a second?
Second.
Is there discussion?
Sure, I could try to add a little more. I think this is one area where I've gotten a lot of feedback from residents and from realtors, both in Ottawa and outside Ottawa. I think we do need to look at how do we best, invest in the department and serve our community. And so I'd love to take a little bit more time and kind of dig into different options that we have. And right now, there's really a monopoly, a county monopoly on the inspection process. So I'd love to see at least options for opening that up a little bit. Like I said, maybe a release valve for some of the work internally. And just look to see if we can, reduce wait times, reduce fees for residents, and then also bring, whatever additional resources are needed into the department.
So do we need to deal with the current motion that's on the table with?
I have a question.
Oh, please.
Thank you.
Commissioner Curran.
This one is for Mr. Ballard. So right now, because I have not personally looked at every health regulation. So my question is, right now, as it stands, with the way things are written, do we have the capability to kind of retool and rework this and kind of take a look at it? Or are the regulations written where only the health department can do this right now?
Yeah, the way that our local regulations are written in environmental health, the time of sale program is specific to the local health department alone to do those. I mean, certainly it's within the purview of the board to look at those regulations. And there's nothing prohibiting.
So it could be reworked. So right now it's not set up that way, but we could look at it and see if we wanted to kind of retool it.
Yeah, we could definitely visit Health and Human Services and go more in depth on the time of sale program and explain how it's worked.
Okay. And for the time of sale program, what are the fees involved and how long does it usually take for them to?
You mind if I tap Drew,
You can
the
tap
supervisor?
whoever you'd like.
I don't even
Tap
know. Yeah,
away.
okay.
Hi, I'm
Hi.
Drew Shaw. I'm the on-site services supervisor. The fees for the, I think they're around $250 to $350. I can't right off the top of my head, but there's a different fee for septic only, and then there's a fee for well only, and then a third fee when you do both of them at the same time, depending on what you have at the house being sold.
Gotcha. And then how long does it usually take once the request is made versus how long do you get out there? Like how long does it take? What's the process time?
Yep. So our current goal is to get that turned around in 10 business days. And with that, our most recent numbers are a little bit above that. For inspections that were completed back in last month, so February, those were right about 13 business days turnaround time.
And thank you so much.
Yep.
Joe, I'm presuming you've done a little more. So can you, as far as the fees and if we were to take it to the private sector, as far as the fees and how long it takes to process, do you have any information on that offhand?
Just from what I know currently, yeah, I could expound a little bit. First, I think it's probably good to say it's not really bad that it's taking maybe a little long than the desired goal. You're always going to set your goals, to something that you want to attain. And really, I think part of what we need to make sure we're focused on is a lot of people are worried or concerned, rightly so, about housing related opportunities in Ottawa County. And so this would be one where we can look at the regulation and see if we can help with some of the related transactional, issues. And so what I've heard from realtors is that sometimes it takes longer. I think looking at the economy and looking at where things are going in the next year, if they continue like they are, we are going to see, a lot of home sales. I don't necessarily, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't see it really going down a lot.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, I gave you
Yeah.
wrong numbers on that. I was looking at the permit turnaround times right now are 13 days. That was for February. The real estate turnaround times for February were 10.3 business days.
Okay.
So
Yep.
just wanted to get that out and correct that.
Yep.
And then to the most recent point with the home sales, I ran numbers, I think it was just a couple weeks ago, and we were meeting the same levels that we were at for the current time for fiscal year 23. So we're definitely not going to see a dip this year. We're projecting the same as we were for last fiscal year. And then depending on how this goes, I mean, we probably will go up. And so much of that is tied to what the Fed interest rates do.
Right.
I mean, we all know the story. Everyone talking that there's pent up demand. And if those interest rates relax a little bit, we could see a huge explosion, or if they don't relax, we might not.
Right. And so in in preparation for that would be part of what I would really like to discuss is there an opportunity to make a change so that there can be a release valve even in the long term?
Yeah.
So that the process can still continue. There's still good standards and things like that. But if Ottawa continues to grow like it is and
Yeah, and I'm open to it. What I'm trying to determine is there a cost savings offered? Like, what does the private sector charge for fees to do these? Like, is there a cost savings to our residents by potentially looking to retool this? Or is it $500? Is it like way more?
I don't know what
No. Joe,
private.
do you know?
no, but that'd be
Okay.
one of the items I want to
Right.
look into.
All right,
And-
gotcha.
And in addition to that, I think one of the more important things to consider is that when you have government controlling the entire process with no opportunity for the private market in our county, in this one particular area, we might be lacking data. So we could look at other counties nearby and just see what they're doing. But in general, government monopoly is always wrong and always the worst way to go. So I'd love to look at opening that up to the private market.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Looking for surrounding counties turnaround times.
Yeah, that'd be really helpful. Yeah.
Right. So I think what I'm hearing is that can we amend this motion to move to the environmental health personnel request to the HHS meeting this month?
I did ask the chair. She said she would be fine if it did get forwarded.
So the motion is to move the environmental health personnel request.
I think Brad had a
I
question.
just had another comment. It's not necessarily related to moving this position, but I do know that we've talked with, our legislative group. They're watching some things happen in Lansing. I don't believe that if we talk about the ability of opening up these inspections to the private sector to participate, that means that we want to completely change and overhaul. Because I do believe our inspection on sales is a best practice. Would like to see that continue because that does offer, the buyer, that level of, protection and knowledge, what they're buying. So to that end, I'd like to see maybe a hybrid.
Yeah, I would agree
Do
with
you
that.
know-
Thank you.
Yeah, do you
Commissioner
know
Belknap.
what the counties surrounding, like what their turnaround time looks like for these inspections?
I don't know, but we could reach out and find that out. I know we reached out to surrounding county last night, right? And then we haven't heard back yet.
Haven't heard
We
back yet.
we can reach out to our counterparts in the different counties and see what they do. And I know to some of the surrounding counties, it's a a lot of counties have the time of sale program, but a lot of them are structured differently. So we definitely can go through that with them and see kind of what they've been seeing recently in the process. I know kind of last time we went through this, I mean, there was a work group on this back in 2014, 2015 that kind of went through this. So we can kind of bring a lot of that knowledge from that work group to the Health and Human Services Committee.
Great.
One,
Any
one,
further que-
one more comment. I've tried to find feedback from local realtors and other people, and I've actually heard some pretty positive things. One of the positives that I've heard is that, and I haven't seen the forms that are produced, but one thing I heard is that some of the realtors really like the quality of the reports they receive. I heard it the other way from a few people, but they like that there's kind of like there's a standard form that people receive or a standard report. That was one of the things that especially one person was really big on, that they like that there's a standard. Yeah.
Kudos,
Anyway.
gentlemen.
I think there's really great discussion that we could have at HHS. Yeah.
Great. All right, so what I think I'm hearing, I'm gonna amend this particular action item. And so environmental health personnel requests to be forwarded to the HHS board for further discussion. Anybody want to add anything more to that? All right. Okay, so all of those, do I have a motion?
No, that would be the motion. Yeah.
Okay.
I think Roger supported it.
Supported it and we've had discussion, so we'll do a roll call vote.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Wenzel,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes,
the motion passes.
thank you. Right, and we are moving on to action item number 7. And that
Madam
is,
Chair, do we still have to vote on the original?
that's what I thought, that's right, okay, thank you. But I thought we amended the. We
I
amended
would
the
motion to move to forward this item. So do we have to?
Do the vote on the amended and then the vote on the original
just
to say.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
So the original is that we are going to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners request from Public Health to add 1 FTE administrative assistant.
So what she's saying is we updated the item. We have to just vote now to approve the amended one as amended.
Oh, I apologize. I'm sorry. I have a migraine headache today and it's starting to show. So my apologies. All right. So we are voting to amend
To
to
forward.
forward. Yes,
Yep,
I
to
thought we
HHS.
just said HHS, the environmental health personnel request. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? We'll go to a roll call vote.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mrs. Wenzel,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes,
motion passes.
thank you. We are moving on to fiscal year 2024 budget adjustments. The motion is to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners the FY 2024 budget adjustments per the attached schedule. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Their discussion? Seeing none, we'll move on to the roll call vote.
Mrs. Curran,
Yes.
Mrs. Wenzel,
Yes.
Mr. Belknap,
Yes.
Mr. Moss,
Yes.
Ms. Cosby,
Yes,
motion passes.
thank you. And so we moved on. The next action item should be our removal of tires. And do I have, forgive me, my. Down. All today. Well, it looks like I had something sent in a little bit late that didn't make it to the agenda, so I'm trying to make sure that we get that added. In a scrap tire collection contract. And do I have a motion to approve and forward to the Board of Commissioners the scrap tire collection contract?
So moved.
Second.
And is there discussion?
Was it emailed out or was there a copy?
It was emailed out.
Okay, thanks.
And I believe we had some discussion with Kim Walters a meeting or two ago. I don't know, Spencer, if you were able to come up and kind of inform us about what this entails.
Sure. This is a contract that enables us to have a scrap tire collection program at our 4 sustainability sites. We are, I'm told by Kim, nearing capacity with our tire collection efforts, but we need to re-up with this contract in order to secure someone to come out and remove those tires from, essentially that's what we're paying for with this contract, is the removal of the tires that we've collected. And so, yeah, it's been in place for years and hope to continue doing that work for the community.
I think you presented it at the last meeting too for finance. So
I have a
Commissioner
question.
Moss?
So this is, I remember it coming up. It was a renewal. Is a renewal of the contract?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yep, exactly.
Does anybody have a copy of it? I couldn't find it. I remember talking about it.
That I don't have.
Let's
Thank
see. Spencer, do you know if it was on an agenda prior?
I think it was on
It was
And-
not, it did not make
No.
it to the agenda.
Okay.
I was gonna let it just kind of go into next month and revisit it, but then I heard from Kim that we're gonna be overrun with tires soon, so I'm hoping we can get this through.
Are you able to email it to us real quick or are you?
I could do some work to get this to you guys quick
Yeah.
right now, if that's helpful.
Or do
Yeah.
you have a copy?
I don't have a copy of it, no.
I don't
This was
personally
something that
have-
was discussed apparently went
And
through
you
the
could-
process as of February 20th and just hasn't made it to the agenda.
recess and get those emailed to us and then come
Yeah,
back.
we could recess.
Yeah, I'll move to recess.
Yeah, I asked, do you need the beach?
Also, could we get the
Yeah,
beach testing
okay. Just
contract
about to
as
say
well?
that.
Spencer?
Both of
That'd be
them.
Great. I'm sorry.
We want to get
Spencer.
this done for you.
Yeah, thank you. I
Absolutely.
appreciate that.
Thank you.
Okay.
So a recess for
Uh,
10?
Yeah, I'll move to recess for 10 minutes or so.
Second.
All those in
Yeah.
favor say aye.
Aye. Thanks, Spencer.
Thank you, Spencer.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay. It's funny. Pardon me? We are back in session. Thank you. Forgive me, it's a migraine day, folks. So many apologies, honestly. So we are reviewing the two additional action items on our agenda and discovering Commissioner Moss. if you'd like to-
Yeah, thank you. So I guess I'll just move to amend the agenda to remove these two items. And then if I get a second, I'll explain why.
Second. Good.
Okay, so sounds like with Kim going on leave, one of them was in the queue and then it got lost. And so they just need a little more time to go through the whole process and get reviewed. And if they're urgent, which maybe they are, maybe the tires one is especially, we can just try to pull it to the board agenda, especially if they're like standard renewals and, maybe, drop it in somewhere. So happy to help out. So I'll follow up with council and whoever else I need to afterwards. Yeah.
No vote required.
Just to amend the agenda, just to remove those two. And thanks for bringing them up because now, sometimes that happens and now we can make sure they get through the process.
So is there a motion to amend the agenda to remove the tire removal renewal and then water quality survey?
Yeah, that was my motion.
Your motion?
Roger seconded.
Second,
Yeah.
okay, so all those in favor
Aye.
and opposed, same sign. Motion passes. So we're moving on to committee reports. The first one is the treasurer's financial month end, then is Cheryl Clark. Morning, Cheryl.
Good morning. So I submitted the financial update to you. I also just passed out some additional notes to the financial update, some Goldman Sachs research information that I thought was interesting. And also a copy of the short-term bond strategies from Robinson Capital that we receive every month. Are there any questions?
Commissioner Moss?
It looked like interest rates were doing pretty well for
Yes.
Ottawa County.
Yes.
So that was good news.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are, just before Amanda retired, we started investing in money market mutual funds, which is a good way to, or a good place to put cash that we need liquid, and it's earning a higher rate. So we are doing better with that additional investment type.
What's the total amount invested, short-term, long-term, approximately? Like people ask me that sometimes, how.
So if you look at the spreadsheet, the chart that's look like this tells you how far out we have investments and how much is invested in that. So you can see we have 66 million in cash, that includes checking, savings, money market mutual fund, anything liquid, pooled government funds. Then the 1 to 30 days is CDs, 31 to 90 days, usually CDs. When you get in over a year, that's our longer term investments. So we have treasuries, agencies, municipal bonds. Some of the shorter term, like 1 to 30 days and stuff, could be the treasuries, agencies, municipal bonds that are maturing soon.
So a pretty fair amount, $150 million.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's sad to read in bullet point number 3 that the existing home sales are expected to be weak due to mortgage rates remaining high, low
Yes.
affordability, but very tight supply. Especially when you look above that and see business investment is expected to grow.
Right.
So we expect our workforce would be expected to grow as well. Have you heard any discussions about kind of what the future looks like?
Not a
Economy,
lot,
any
no.
changes?
No.
In the forecast?
Just that they are not expecting a recession like it had been predicted for a while. But things can change.
And the trade deficit is expected to narrow.
Yes.
Do you know why they're expecting that to narrow?
So they said, let's see. I think it was the policymakers were working on trade deficit, some changes. And that's why they were expecting it to narrow.
I apologize. The last thing I want to do today, especially, is catch somebody off guard.
That's
That's
okay.
not my intention.
That's
I'm
all
off
right. I
guard,
should have
so-
put that in there.
No, just curious more than anything else.
It was a long article, many pages, so I was trying to just hit the bullet points.
Summarize
but
it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does anybody have any questions of Cheryl?
Sure. Sure.
Commissioner Moss?
One more thing, something that Commissioner Curran, I think, mentioned this morning when we were chatting is that the federal government adds $1 trillion in debt every 100 or so days. Is that, I believe? So I guess my question, my statement is that's insane, crazy, and should stop.
Agreed.
But my question would be, offhand, do you know what the county's like debt service load is?
I do not. Do
Okay,
you,
no,
Karen?
that's okay. I would love to have a conversation about that later.
Yeah,
Yeah, that'd be really, really
I
interesting.
think that'd be a great conversation to
Yeah.
have. Mhm.
And are there ways that we can protect the county from what's happening on the federal level?
Right.
Yeah. Mhm. Mhm.
All ideas are good
Mhm.
at this point. Anybody have any further questions? Cheryl?
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and then moving on to fiscal audit of ARPA funds and Karen Karasinski. Good morning.
Hello, good morning. Okay, so, do we have a clicker? So last month, I was asked to pull together really an ARPA, I don't know if you want to call it a audit or a review of the ARPA funds. So just walking through that process again. Today, I really wanted to talk about the timeline and some key dates and some terms. And because there's American Rescue Plan, there's the state and local fiscal recovery funds, which is a grant. And then there's the board initiatives, which have all kind of been used interchangeably, and they're very specific things. And then I was going to do a summary of expenditures kind of by bucket or by category and available dollars. So in March of 2021, the American Rescue Plan was signed into law. So that was the name of the bill that was actually signed. Shortly thereafter, Ottawa County applied for state and local fiscal recovery funds, which are SLFRF funds. That is the grant dollars that were available due to the American Rescue Plan Act. So Treasury basically issued what they called an interim final rule, which is really the guidelines to spend the dollars. It was called interim because they wanted feedback. And then later on, I think it was January, it comes up a little later, but they passed the final rules that you could spend the dollars. So in June of 2021, we received the first of 2 payments. So they made the payments in the first year, and then you had to ask, and there's a second payment. At the same time, the Board of Commissioners created an ARPA task force to look at the guidelines and discuss what the community need. The Department of Treasury issued the compliance and reporting guidelines. So the Department of Treasury came out with some grant guidelines, some reporting guidelines that you'd have to comply with to spend the grant dollars you were eligible for. So in July, the task force started to meet monthly. So just talking about ARPA, when it was first issued, there was a number of categories that were eligible. So it was very high level. before the guidelines, there wasn't an incredible amount of detail, but it came out. These were the areas that were eligible: public health, negative economic impact, services to disproportionately impacted communities, premium pay, infrastructure, revenue replacement, and then administration. So that was the ARPA dollars. Under the state and local recovery funds, which I would say, you know, ARPA, state and local recovery funds, really you're talking about the same thing. It's one is the law, the other is the grant that supports the law. But under that, there is the revenue replacement category that I had mentioned earlier, and the revenue replacement category. So when the federal government provided this funding, they gave us guidelines that we had to follow. They said the funds needed to be expended by 12/31/24, expended or committed. Expenses, so there's reporting to the Department of Treasury. There were certain reports we had to have on our website. And then all federal dollars or all federal grant dollars have to be audited with a single audit. That is a separate audit that happens annually with our independent external auditors. So they audit our financial statements, and then there's a completely separate, it's based on our federal expenditures. So the single audit is an audit of federal grant funds. Revenue replacement specifically, between 2016 and 2019, they measured the county's average growth rate. So our average growth rate during that period was 8.7%. And basically they said that 2019 would be your base. And then they wanted you to validate that your revenues had maintained that average growth rate through the pandemic. So the measure was, if you didn't maintain that growth rate, you had lost revenues. So it just so happens between 2016 and 19, we had a couple of unique circumstances that probably elevated our growth rate. So I think Ottawa Sands, for example, was the state grant was or the trust agreement where we acquired Ottawa Sands happened during that period. So our 8.7 might have been a little elevated. The lost revenue, it was an annual calculation. So it's an annual calendar year calculation. So the idea was, if you had lost revenues, you could use your grant dollars to provide services to residents, and they wanted you to continue to monitor, thinking that potentially these dollars would come back. So giving the economy a little bit longer to recover from the pandemic. So there was a few items that you could not spend the grant dollars on under this revenue replacement, but in general, it was pretty much services provided to residents. It's an eligible expenditure. So in August, we calculated the amount for the revenue replacement for calendar year 2020. And then we estimated what we thought might happen in future years. So excluding federal revenue, because the calculation had us, so we followed a very specific calculation, had us exclude federal revenue. So the growth between 19 and 20 was less than 8.7. So the county could report lost revenue in the amount of $19 million, right up there at the top of the slide. It was also projected at that time, when we just looked out at what we expected our growth to be, that probably the whole 56.7 million of grant dollars could be eligible under this category. So the above amounts on this slide, the $49,094,556, is actually the total lost revenue that we've calculated and used. So this slide is actually showing actuals. There was times during this period where we were doing projections and just seeing what we thought would happen. This entire time, the ARPA task force is still meeting and talking about other needs in the community in addition to this lost revenue or revenue replacement. So we've kind of got two things happening at the same time. We're doing these calculations under the federal grant requirements, and the ARPA task force is still meeting and talking about the needs in the community. So with revenue replacement, the conversation kind of eventually evolved to was the revenue replacement are grant funds to pay for direct services to residents. As I mentioned, during the pandemic or during this timeframe, the budget was balanced. When we first did the calculation, we were a little surprised by the $19 million figure. We weren't really expecting that because we had a balanced budget. But when you back out all the federal revenues, which were a lot of grant funds were received that were federal dollars to respond to the pandemic. So when you back that out in combination with just a lot of departments kind of slowing a little bit, everybody was staying home. There was a period there, especially in the beginning, where it was very quiet. So, but our budget was balanced. Each year we never ended a year in a deficit. So when we did those calculations, we were a little surprised, but even still, it was a legitimate eligible expenditure. And so the idea was presented to submit the projects under the lost revenue category. And the benefits of that would be, the reduced risk of grant finding and potential payback. The board determines how the funds can be spent by approved contracts and establishes the reporting requirements, timeline, and metrics. Budgetary savings could be set aside and accounted for separately. So as the task force was meeting, there was some anxiety expressed about the guidelines, about just the administrative requirements to report under the guidelines, the oversight required. There was a consultant that we had met with and actually we are working with today, but it was Guidehouse. And we are talking with them about this process, and they mentioned that they would help us from any level that we wanted, either the entire process, monitor. They had suggested that they had other clients setting aside 10% of their grant dollars for this assistance. And 10% for an administrative overhead is pretty acceptable in the federal world. So, but setting aside $5 million seemed like we would be foregoing projects for administrative oversight. So we felt like the potential to use the revenue replacement option would be positive. So in January of 2022, the board approved the first state and local fiscal recovery fund project. I had mentioned earlier, the Department of Treasury finally issued the final rule. And then in May, the board approved 4 more projects of these fiscal recovery funds. And then the final project was approved in 2023. But basically, under our revenue replacement methodology, there was 4 basic projects that were approved, and it was public safety payroll, court services payroll, prosecuting attorneys, and clerk services. So these are the final dollars, the budgets that were established, and it was areas that were providing direct services to residents, and it finished out at that 49.1, as I mentioned earlier about our revenue replacement numbers that we were calculating. The only other difference that was awarded under this state and local recovery funds grant is the Outdoor Discovery Center Network that ended up in the final project numbers. So that project was a recommendation from the ARPA task force. The criteria for the recommendation, the projects as they came forward, was that the county has a statutory authority to engage in the services that were being recommended. This Outdoor Discovery Network is a childcare, it's capital, it's infrastructure. There is a community investment and county investment to come together to create more childcare sites and availability. There was also a component of in-house childcare that they were working towards to elevate the number of childcare available. I think over a period of time over this project, they wanted to increase it by, I think it was 1,000. I might be high on that number or low, but they wanted to increase the number of childcare sites available. This was seen specifically very challenging during the pandemic, and they were addressing that need in the community. It was an area that was specifically called out in the guidelines, in the final rules. So that project moved forward. It was approved by the board, I believe, in November of 22. I think there was a final contract and a presentation here in early 23, but that is basically the budget established for all of our state and local recovery funds. So there were two other projects that did not meet when the task force came forward on, that did not meet the ARPA rules or the state and local recovery fund rules, the grant rules. BizStream Academy expansion, it was 700,000. They wanted to expand computer training to all high school students. Under the federal guidelines, only Title I schools would be eligible, kind of under these ARPA interim rule guidelines. As it turned out, we only have one Title I school. It really was not the purpose of the project. Therefore, it did pass the board in November. It was supported to be funded, but it was supported contingent on Guidehouse reviewing the contract and all the rules and making sure it fit under one of the categories. So that project did not move forward. There was another one, Michigan Works Earn and Learn Manufacturing Career Fair, and that was just over $100,000 to be approved. That was to aid to other impacted industries outside of travel, tourism, and hospitality industry. So the guidelines established the harm that was not met, the harm that was met to that travel and tourism. And then they said, but if you have another industry that was harmed very similarly, you could also include them. Well, when we looked at worked with Guidehouse, looked at different metrics for the manufacturing industry, they did not meet that level of harm. So that project did not move forward either. So those were a few that actually had support to be funded, and then did not end up becoming part of our total grant picture here. So really at this point, you know, I'm showing things kind of after the fact, so you're seeing final numbers, but it was really a series of events. And when we started talking about the lost revenue, and then the task force was still meeting, we really, the language it was probably a little confusing to most people, because we just kept calling everything ARPA. And so there was really no distinction made, because we had the ARPA task force then making recommendations to really spend budgetary savings. And that's what in finance, what we call board initiatives, because all this budgetary savings was set aside, and that's what we're actually using to fund the rest of the contracts. So the board, had continued, they approved 3 advisory agreements. I think you've heard us refer to them as bucket managers to look at the different areas. In July of 22, we received our second payment of 28.3 million. In August, there was the task force and the county went a collaborative effort to do a public survey regarding community needs. And then in November, there was a group of recommendations made by the task force, and then finally to the board for approval of those contracts. So again, what you're seeing here is this is as it exists today. These are the projects that were approved by category of the lost revenue. So this is the budgetary savings as a result of lost revenue under that grant. So the total budgetary savings for board initiatives was $49,184,556. So of that, I've broken out things in categories, and then there's an amount available today of $4.1 million. So this other picture is just the same information minus the amount available. So it's kind of what it looks like in a pie chart. And this is budget. So not all of these are not necessarily complete. So, but this is currently what's out there under current agreements. So you may wonder, where did the available balance come from? Because it has changed a little bit over time in the past year. So the $4.1 million, so there was $145,000 that was never committed. And then there was a project under affordable housing for the dwelling place. It was an approved amount of $2 million. The contract was approved contingent on the developer receiving additional funds, grant funds. I believe there was 2 grant opportunities, 2 grant processes that they wanted to go through and see if they could get approval. That did not occur. So that contract really just became null and void. I mean, that didn't meet, they didn't have the other funding. The $2 million was contingent upon that. So the $2 million became available in the board initiatives. So the employee inflation payment, we had made an estimate of that being at the $5.1 million. And it wasn't, it was 600,000 less. So that $600,000 came back and was funds available to be reassigned. The other project that had a change is there was a Medicaid cost-based reimbursement. So in the public health department, there is something that's called Medicaid cost-based reimbursement. You submit your encounter data and it goes through this process, and you receive funding. It's a catch-up process. It takes about 2 years for everything to get right-sized. During the pandemic, we saw less encounters in the clinic, and we saw a decrease in revenue in that area. And we knew we had to get back up to having full encounters. And then we knew that we had to submit the data. It had to go through the 2-year process before we would see that revenue coming back. And so we had built our budget around an annual amount of approximately $1.2 million in this cost-based reimbursement. We kind of said that was our base, or what we were pre-pandemic. And so the $1.5 million was an effort to provide funding that was there as revenue replacement until that base level was reestablished. And as of 9/30/23, there's a little bit budgeted in 24, but basically 9/30/23, we returned 1.1,355,000 because we're really back up to that base level. I would say the state really did a great job in this area. We saw them really keeping up on things and getting that information processed. So that's where the $4.1 million comes from, those really 4 categories. So I guess I was at this point, I was just going to see if there's any questions. I did provide another form. It's a very detailed list that was in the packet. This is, it really just provides you a list of the things that were approved. This is under the board initiatives category. So all of the items that were approved, kind of the bucket that I dropped them in, and the date approved, the project amount. So you could see the dwelling place there on line 3. It's listed still because it was approved, but the project budget was 0 because the 2 million basically is no longer required. The paid amount is because we're in process of paying all these, or we have payments that have gone out already under these contracts or agreements, and they're encumbered. So, just to point out a couple things, some of the county contracts. So, under the Affordable Housing Revolving Loan Fund. So that's $10 million. We wrote a check and that money is invested. The contract calls for 20 years. There's a note receivable in our financial statements for $10 million. It's a long-term receivable because at some point, 20 years into the future, a decision will need to be made if that program is going to continue in its current form, a different form, or the funds would come back to the county. So, but I showed it as paid because technically 20 years is a long ways away. But if you look under another example, maybe 19 Victims Assistance Fund, that was $1 million grant where prosecuting attorney's office to have funds invested, and they were seeing a decline in their grant dollars to support victims of crime. So they wanted to have these invested and set aside, and then this interest would be available to use. So they're looking to create something where they can still respond to a need in the community. And so I did not show that as spent because technically we will never spend that principal, but it is aligned, it is currently invested, and we have appropriated dollars in the 24 budget to help support that effort. So I mean, these are all unique, and it kind of just depends on the situation and the grant, but so there's a number of different programs here, but in an effort, I was trying to give you some idea of where we were in that. Obviously, the broadband for $7.5 million, we're still waiting for that grant. The capital projects contribution, that transfer for $5 million, that was budgeted in 2024. Those funds are currently sitting in the capital projects fund. They haven't technically been spent yet, but they are in our long-term plan, and that $5 million we are counting on to fund capital projects over the next 5 to 6 years. So, and we talked about that last year during budget. So but so I didn't show it as spent. I mean, in my mind, it's doing what it's supposed to be doing. It's in the capital projects fund, which is what we had agreed to use those funds on. But I'm not showing it's spent here because I don't know if I will continue to track it the same way, because at some point it's just going to become capital project dollars. I don't know that I'll keep this designation to it necessarily, unless I'm specifically asked to do that. So I guess with that, I'll just ask if there's any questions, or if I try to address the questions as I understood them.
Commissioner Moss?
I do, but I just need a minute.
Okay. So Karen, the board initiatives were subject to different eligibility requirements than the ARPA dollars, correct? Can you explain that?
So I would say, yeah, the ARPA task force did talk about the community need and the funds and the requirement, and that was the things that they recommended were all things in the, I would say, in the light of or in the desire to respond to needs that have come out of the pandemic. But they were not subject to the scrutiny of the final guidelines.
And those changed kind of over time, right? Weren't there two sets of guidelines that came out for the ARPA dollars and how they could be spent? Excuse me.
So the first one was just a preliminary so they could get feedback. And then the final, I would say, if anything, they probably loosened the final up a little bit. They removed some of the more stringent requirements that you have. So you have to have everyone who receives federal dollars has to have a single audit if you receive more than $750,000 a year. So they looked for ways to, if this was the one time, they tried to make it easier for people to accept these dollars as a federal recipient. So things like that, they under capital, when you have a federal grant and you're investing it in capital, there's something called the Davis-Bacon Act that you would normally follow. But under the final guidelines, some of those rules were softened or removed. And so there was changes, but I would say for the most part, but we were working in an environment, we didn't know what they were going to be. We didn't know they were going to get easier. We didn't know if they were going to get harder. But it was just kind of evolving over time.
And the second release of kind of requirements was much easier, if I remember correctly, or?
I think it was easier. And they actually, the revenue calculation, the lost revenue calculation that we did, they actually just eliminated that for smaller governments. So if you receive less than $10 million, you could immediately just apply all of your grant dollars to lost revenue. No calculation required. So a lot of small communities did that.
And so like for instance, like Shore Habitat for Humanity, would they have been able to receive dollars more easily, a grant more easily under the initial ARPA kind of requirements versus now where we've moved that money into the county, basically under budget or board initiatives? They're different.
So I guess
eligibility.
I probably wouldn't know unless I ran their project through the guidelines and looked specifically for the area that they were addressing and where that requirements came from. I mean, when the two contracts that did not meet the ARPA guidelines were passed, I don't know that I knew that they weren't going to meet the guidelines until you dig. It's like this. So until you dig in, you're really not gonna know until you walk through all those guidelines.
We're still looking for comparables there. Commissioner Moss.
So I have maybe a comment is related to that and comparables a little bit. So it looks like, so you've brought up Habitat for Humanity wanting to see if there was any other funding from the county for one of the projects that didn't get funded, I believe, or
That's like 40 houses, new
Okay.
start homes, yeah.
okay, and so about 40 homes or something like that. I looked at, so Samaritas did receive or is slated to receive 1.5 million for 53 units. Those are probably rental units, I assume, but quite a lot more money per unit. So if you're looking for comparables, there's at least some data you could work with there. Also, the dwelling place that did not eventually get approved was asking for 2 million, or maybe it was slated for 2 million, however that discussion went. And that was for 46 units. So I guess there's other factors, but
These are rental.
those are probably rentals. Yep, yeah, yeah. Yeah, true.
So throughout this process, Doug Van Essen, Corporation Counsel at the time, was looking for that statutory authority to proceed under the contract from the county. So that was, as I said, the area where the three that came forward kind of fell out. And that's why the board, wanted those as direct ARPA. And if they met those requirements, then they wanted to fund them.
Well, we could also look at, based on, that $2 million that the prior board intended to go towards housing, we could look at using just a, portion of that for habitat. That'd be interesting to me.
I think there's some eligibility issues related to it because of where it sits, the money sits now. Mr. Jordan, you're nodding, so.
Yes, I am
Yeah.
nodding. Not nodding off, but
No.
yeah, it's a question that still revolves in my mind as to whether or not public funds would be spent on a private purpose.
Mhm.
And it's a question that still has not been resolved in my mind. And we want to see what other counties are doing in terms of habitat. And I think that would go a long way in helping you to make a decision whether or not we can proceed in that direction.
Is that really at all related to why there's still over $1 million encumbered for Samaritas? What, have they not received that money?
That would be a question for Karen.
Okay.
So it's really just a timing issue of submitting receipts and being reimbursed.
Okay. So Samaritas could receive money, but maybe to build housing, but other organizations can't? Is that what I'm
There were different
hearing?
eligibility requirements, right? One was
Correct,
ARPA,
correct.
and then the other bucket now is moved into the requirements of the state.
Well, these are all board initiatives. So
Right.
these are all funded based on the county's statutory authority to engage in this type of a contract.
Yep.
I think, at least when I had spoken with Jack earlier, it's the Habitat for Humanity is more the individual home versus these were multi-unit. And I don't know if that's just as I understood it. I don't know.
Okay.
That's not my lane, but.
So some additional conversation later.
Yes,
Yeah.
the
Okay.
whole question centers on ownership.
Okay.
I'm all
Okay.
for, I think the statute is clear in terms of low income housing, but then who owns the housing?
Mhm.
In Habitat, it's one I've always thought of. They are rehabilitating homes for private individuals.
Mhm.
That's the difference that I see. But again, I want to pursue it further and examine what other counties are doing as it relates to habitat.
There are different eligibility requirements though, correct, from ARPA dollars versus now that we've moved it into our board initiatives bucket.
That is correct as well.
Yes.
And I think Karen has
So-
already outlined that.
And I think Habitat, from what I understand, and they're not rehabbing homes, they're building homes. Yeah, they're building new homes. Yeah,
Building
they might have a rehab
rehab,
component, but they're building.
but again, it goes back to private ownership.
Okay, so it's the ownership.
And that's
versus-
the difference.
Okay,
Public funds being used for private entities, private people. I mean,
Individual home ownership versus
Yeah.
rental.
so I just need more,
We're looking for
Okay.
comparables.
yeah.
And
Feel like a
staff would have to
realtor.
do that. Commissioner Moss.
Yeah, just wondering, there was 750,000 left in the guidehouse contract. Is that just because there's reporting long into the future that we don't know what might happen?
We had set aside 10% of the projects that were approved. I expect some of that will be returned at
Okay.
some point, but for right now, they are still assisting us with the ODC project,
And is that one moving forward fully? Was 7.5 or so?
as I understand it,
Okay.
yes, at the last reporting.
Okay. How about number 23? I was wondering what that was. Mental health professionals, $1 million.
So that is, there was a shortage of doctors in the area to respond to people who wanted their services, and so there were long wait times. So this grant was kind of mirrored after a similar program. So I don't remember the name, but if a doctor does a certain number of Medicaid payments, gets hired, opens a practice at a hospital or a facility here in Ottawa, and agrees to see a certain level of patients and meet a bunch of criterias. There is a, I don't know how they modeled it, but payment of loan debt, or to attract doctors to the area. And so that's why you'll see the encumbered amount, because those were doctors they are attracting. And so this is a multi-year, thinking they would move to the community, receive payment over 4 years or so, and then hopefully stay.
Do we know who that went to? Like, where did that go to? I wasn't sure who received it.
It's, I'd have to, I know we know, but I'd
Yeah.
have to look.
Okay.
And I want to say, if I remember correctly, I think I was sitting out in the audience during that time. This was for specifically child psychologists that they were trying to attract to the area. I think we were short like about 4 to 6 psychologists for Ottawa County.
Oh, yeah, I see it.
Yeah.
I know the program is different for those who see adults and those who see children. I
Okay.
think it's more rewarding. They were trying to attract the psychiatrists that see children.
Yeah, I definitely remember this.
Okay. That one seems like maybe we could revisit that and look at it a little bit, because the time is, I'd love to just get more information on that later.
Sure.
Yeah.
I have a question.
Commissioner Curran.
Thank you. Just so I'm clear, the balances, like for instance, broadband's got 7.5. So we've got some very high balances sitting, just kind of waiting to be utilized. What are they just sitting in the general fund, or are they being invested? So we're earning money on those?
They're invested.
Okay.
All the cash is invested. This is so committed is an accounting term that the board sets aside resources for a specific purpose. So there was great comfort in the board that did that these could not just be kind of lost in the general fund. So when that happens, we set up a separate fund and we track it so that movement is separate. But when you look at our countywide statements, you would see it's folded in to the general fund and it shows up as committed. So it's kind of an accounting, the way we manage funds when the board says, please commit these funds to do X.
Thank you.
Commissioner Moss.
One more question. Do we know who chaired the ARPA task force committee? Like, did it have a leader?
The ARPA task force is, all the members are still on the website. I know I think there was 2 board members that were on that committee that they would call the meeting to order and things like that.
Okay.
But the list is there. I could name everybody that was on the task force. It was a large group.
I've got it.
Point of clarification too. So some of the dollars that we received, some of the award that we received were paid out per ARPA requirements. And then some were paid out or right now potentially being paid out under board initiatives, correct? So two sets of eligibility standards, or they're all
No,
board?
we have to comply 100% with the grant rules. On the lost revenue replacement, that is an eligibility criteria from the guidelines. So that was a completely eligible expenditure. Our last report for that was filed in June of 23. We've completed our single audit. You'll be receiving it here in April. And there has not been an issue with any of our expenditures as we reported them on our audit. So it's one set of rules for the ARPA dollars. It's just the savings from the way that we spent the ARPA dollars, the budgetary savings that we had. The board also wanted to do the initiatives that the task force was bringing forward.
So you brought the dollars into board initiatives, the previous board did too, and they met the eligibility requirements, but to cover kind of expenses of the county, would you say that's fair?
So the ARPA dollars, the lost revenue, the eligible criteria is it had to be spent on expenditures that were providing direct services to residents. So public safety, court services, all of those areas provide direct services to residents.
Thank you. You else have any further questions? Commissioner Moss?
I just have a statement. Was trying to decide if I want to say it or not, but I guess I will. I just want to say for the record that it is a little concerning to me that a committee led by board members had a dozen or more closed meetings to figure out how to spend $57 million of county funds. And then brought it to one like open board meeting maybe, or a couple. I really think that was not the right way to go about doing this. But that is quite a long time ago. But
That brings up the fact that it's different criteria, correct? So the ARPA funds have a different set of criteria for, what gets reimbursed or what doesn't, what gets paid, versus once it comes into the county under the bucket of board initiatives, there's another set of criteria eligibility.
I think those are that makes sense to me, although I think my comment is different. I just think maybe it is related. Yeah. I think the entire process should have been at open meetings. I know that other counties had a lot of their process, like Kent County had open meetings when they went through this stuff. So I find it very unfortunate that the committee, then took requests, eliminated requests, approved some, disapproved others, and eventually kind of pulled everything up to the board. But I think that was kind of how things used to work.
Brought the money into the county.
Yeah. I maybe kind of comically, I'd say if we did that, you would never hear the end of it. But that's why we're focused on transparency and keeping things being done in the open.
And so as far as posting, I guess I'm not sure what I didn't look at to see, but I do know, and maybe it was I do know there were other people in the room at different times.
Yes,
but as
many.
far as posting, I'm not,
Yeah.
So I think you're referring to the posting requirements.
Yeah.
Any further questions of Karen? Being none, thank you, Karen. Next on the agenda is Department Cost of Service Delivery Metrics, and that's Benjamin Wetmore.
Good afternoon, commissioners. There's a packet in front of you. You will find just labeled county metrics report.
This is information that we've requested from all the department leaders on their department metrics, capturing their key metrics. These are kind of tentative numbers, so please don't hold them to it. This is really just to get our arms around both numbers that will animate the strategic plan, but also the cost of service delivery analysis. This information reflects the tremendous work of our Ottawa County employees and volunteers. The numbers aren't going to capture everything, of course. I think it's a good snapshot. You'll definitely see a variety. Some departments have easier metrics to provide than others, and certain departments certainly have quite a range of programs that they offer. The Department of Public Health and the Department of Strategic Impact have very extensive reports in here. So the work that each department's doing is meant to ensure that the county remains a growing, vibrant destination for citizens, a place where freedom rings. Several department heads asked to attend this meeting to explain their metrics, and I asked them not to come because, again, this is really just a preliminary document and will help us create a better delivery for strategic planning purposes and also, again, for cost of service delivery. So again, these numbers are subject to some change and revision later, but this is the first important step in the process, a longer process that we'll be engaged in for the next few months. We've asked the department heads to clarify and identify and define their own key metrics. So these are this report is capturing all of their programs, but we'd also like them to engage in identifying their key metrics, which will be critical moving forward. I think this is also something that we can do to ultimately reduce costs on our vendor relationships for developing the strategic plan by creating these models and creating this analysis so that we have something to give our vendors to start from, a foundation that they can start from so that we can save some costs for the county ultimately in the long run. I also think these will help us start a comparison between departments, between the public and private sector options, and of course, between different public sector analysis that exists between counties and between the state and county government, again, animating our cost of service delivery analysis over the next few months. So I'm very pleased to provide this to you. I think the departments did a great job, and this information definitely reflects that they are doing a great job each and every day. And I think you'll be proud of what you see throughout each department.
Excellent tool, a lot to go through too, but
Sure.
Especially I think relevant as we start to look at budget planning for the next fiscal year.
Yep.
So kudos to our leadership for putting this, our departments for putting this together.
We tried to make the report here easy to digest. If there are any questions about fonts that are too small or some sometimes the coloring that different departments used makes the text a little harder to read. We have a larger version, a higher resolution version. It's just putting it in on base. There were certain limitations on the resolution size. So there was a bit of a trade-off there, but we have, if you have a hard time reading anything, let us know and we'll get you an easier format to read.
Commissioner Moss?
Sure. I just want to say thank you. I really enjoyed going through this. I went through all of it.
Great.
I would definitely need to go through all of it again, maybe a couple times. But it's very informative. I'm not sure if this is if a report or an effort like this has ever been done before, but I'm glad that it was. And thank you, Chair Cosby, for kind of pushing that forward. I think it will be very helpful to see and very informative for planning and future planning, things like that.
Great, thank you.
And you can tell that the department heads and the staff really put a lot of work into it, and really added in extra detail to be helpful. It's great wealth of information.
It helps them with their strategic planning going forward too.
Right.
Commissioner Belknap?
Just curious on the the guidance given to the department heads for this, because, some of the business units are so disparate in what they do. And so, a concept that might be kind of standardized and 3/4 of it might just be, like a foreign language, for example. I guess looking at this and going forward and implementing our budget planning software that will kind of assist with strategic planning and budgeting. I imagine a lot of this will get kind of pared down, right? As we kind of refine, because this is sort of like the first time we threw it all at the wall, right?
Correct.
And some of these metrics are valuable information. Some of them, not that they're not valuable, but it'll be one of those things that, well, we don't really look at that all the time. So I guess my message is, this is a process, and, there may be some bumps along the way, not to get so tied into it has to be this certain way, but, I do appreciate, that we're asking these questions and being able to kind of measure impact on, policy changes or strategy or, prioritization. So.
And that was, your concern was reflected by department head concerns as well, which was, how far down do we need to break down our programs? And, there were several departments that were getting into the 0.1 FTE level program analysis. And we said, no, please don't. We don't need to go that deep, at least not right now. And, they also wanted to ensure that the numbers were accurate. And again, there's some rough calculations that are in here. So my best advice would be, if you have any questions, please reach out to administration or to the department heads about any of the individual department metrics. But just to your point, yes, this is the first step of the process. And this is really so that we can get our arms around a model that will help us moving forward on these more complicated analyses.
Anyone else? No? All right, seeing nobody else has questions, thank you very much, Ben.
Thank you.
All right, and we're on to discussion items. And our discussion item today is water resources in Ottawa Conservation District with Mr. Joe Bush.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I still have a little voice, so good afternoon. What I wanted to come and discuss with you today is kind of a scenario that happened about this time last year, where Ottawa County received a check from a civil class action lawsuit out of California. And I actually handed out a paper to everybody, and it's really called the Monsanto settlement. And that was a $6.7 million settlement that Ottawa County got. And so what does that mean? Again, this time last year, we received a check for $6.7 million. And they said, well, here's kind of, and if you really wanted me to get into detail, I got the whole 500 pages, and I don't think we want to go through that. So what I did, and I met with Gibbs, I met with Jack Jordan, Lene, Joe Moss was in that meeting when the check came in, because at that time, Amanda Price said, does anybody know what this check's for? Where does it go? And coming to find out, it's for this class action lawsuit. So what I did was I had my legal team put together what they read into it. And it's not a legal opinion at all. And it says this in this paper. It just talks about the highlights of why was Ottawa County picked, because of our high TMDLs. TMDL is total maximum daily loads, and the PCBs. So when I look at a map, just to give you an idea, and I actually brought this map to the meeting when we had that, and it's got every one of your commissioners' districts in here, and it talks about the impaired bodies of water that are in your districts, which are mainly all the county drains or creeks that we have jurisdiction over in my department. So we highlighted this, and what the discussion is today is what I've been working on as far as water quality in Ottawa County. We need to monitor it. And I felt like at the time when we discussed the 6.7, that some of that money could be used in the future for water quality monitoring with our partners, which is Outdoor Discovery and Conservation District. So I'll back up a little bit. Ottawa County has zero money into this civil lawsuit. So we did not pay an attorney. There was no funds spent, taxpayers' dollars, to get 6.7 million. Out of all the counties in the state of Michigan, we were the highest paid settlement in there. So again, this was no money from Ottawa County to like file a lawsuit or participate. We could opt out at one time, and we did not opt out. We stayed in, and they figured that with the impaired bodies of water that we have, that we would receive money. That's how we got those funds. And what my goal would be is to use some of that money in the future with my partners, who I do have here today from Outdoor Discovery and the Conservation District, because this is what they do when we come to water quality. So some people said, well, how does California, how did the PCBs and those TIMDOs, the pollutants in the water, get in the lawsuit? Eagle, or DEQ, formerly known as DEQ, they actually take a snapshot of those bodied waters and then send those in and say, oh, you have some impaired water. You have some pollutants in the water. Then they come up with their plan of what we need to do to react to that. Well, as you guys know, I'm very involved in local control. And if I were to be able to have some funds, like a 5-year plan, is kind of what I put together with the Conservation District and Outdoor Discovery, and use that, some of this funds, some of that 6.7 million, and be able to document and monitor what our bodies of water actually have in them. Right now, we're taking a snapshot through Eagle, not through our department or not through any other department, unless you're environmental health, which they did get a grant from Eagle for beach monitoring, which is a little different than the stream monitorings. And then it's different than the strategic impact groundwater monitoring. Are they related? All water is related somewhat, but it's not related to strategic impact. It's non-point source in our streams and creeks. So that's kind of what I wanted to have discussion today, was to bring up the lawsuit and to know that, you know, I know a lot of board members didn't know that we received 6.7. At that time, it is invested, like Karen says, it's in the general fund. It is making interest. All of our cash is making interest, which is good. It's good to see the interest rates are, you know, it's earning good interest, because I do check in with Cheryl and see how much money is that making, which is a positive for Ottawa County. But as your elected official, the Water Resources Commissioner, some people said, well, is it really your duty for the water quality? And I feel like it is, because it is part of our strategic planning. It is our mission statement that we want to make sure that the water in Ottawa County is clean, especially if we're fishing in it, we're playing in it, and we irrigate out of it. We want to make sure that it's good, clean water. So as part of my job, I want to make sure that I can use those funds in the future with the board approval, with my partners from the Conservation District, who actually partner now with Paul Sachs in strategic impact, because they do the other monitor water, you know, the water monitoring. And one of the benefits of, if we get okay, the next question would be, what do you do with the monitoring? What do you do with the data collection? Well, you apply for grants, and I'm very selective of grants. I don't go after a lot of grants, but I'm very selective. If we have that data set of the information and data that we would need, we could bring a lot of a lot of grant money back to Ottawa that other counties or other states are taking away. I like to bring that back to Ottawa. If they're telling me that I have impaired bodies of water, then I want to prove them that if we do, then I want to receive that money instead of other states or other counties. Because it's taxpayers' money at the end of the day. Don't matter how you shred it, it's taxpayers' money. So my job would be to bring that back home to Ottawa County. And I know that the Conservation District does a heck of a job receiving money and grants. And I know Outdoor Discovery gets a lot of money through grants and those opportunities that they bring back to Ottawa County. So that's kind of a highlight of what I wanted to talk about. Sorry about my voice. It kind of goes, I usually need water. Hey, it's a lot better than what it was. Ask Joe. For about 3 weeks, I'll be whispering. So anyway, that's kind of one I want to hit on a little bit about. And Joe, if you want to speak to it.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I just had kind of a question, since we have guests with us, if there's anything they have, any commentary they have prepared or anything like that.
Well, we didn't know how much we wanted to share because it's a discussion item, but they're more than happy. We do have information that they could talk about how they would team up with me and partner on what that contract would look like. We're in the budget season, so I could allocate some of those funds back to my department. I'm not asking for staff. I'm just asking for a contractual with the conservation district. But if Ben Jordan, the watershed technician, he'll come up and he can share and go through those numbers to give you some insight of what that looks like.
Madam Chair, I'd like to hear more. I know there'll be more discussion after this, but any general info I'd appreciate. Yeah.
I do have some handouts too. I don't know how I can distribute those to everybody. But...
Thanks.
All right. Well, I am Ben Jordan. I am the Watershed Programs Coordinator for the Ottawa Conservation District. And I've been there for about 8 years. So I think just in terms of some general information to give you, the reason why we kind of put this proposal or this idea together for kind of a comprehensive monitoring strategy for the whole county is, like Joe said, we do have some snapshots. If you want to answer the question, what's in our water, you have to do the monitoring, you have to take that data countywide for a lot of different metrics, right? And the issue is we have about 35 different watersheds throughout the county, and in each one of them, we have tiny little snapshots. We have little bits of data here and there that's been collected by, whether it's the state or our conservation district or other organizations, but we don't have the full picture anywhere. To use E. coli as an example, we've found kind of a pattern, right? So not every single watershed, actually most of the watersheds throughout Ottawa County don't have good E. coli data, or if they do, it's 10, 20 years old. But what we found is that every single watershed you do go out and you test for, we're finding very high E. coli. So just a couple of years ago, we wrote a watershed management plan for the Pigeon River. We found, some of those locations, if you took a snapshot, you took some E. coli data, especially after a rain event, we would find, 10, 15, 20 times as much E. coli in the water as, water quality standards say should be in there. So that's kind of just one example. But again, you look at these 35 different watersheds, you look at all of the TMDLs that do exist in Ottawa County, those are known impairments, and those impairments have data that's kind of connected to them. But again, it's not a comprehensive view. They might be looking at one or two inputs, one or two known impairments, but there's a whole set of metrics that we don't have for those watersheds. So this, this idea, this project that we had, it's looking at all those watersheds and all those metrics. We want to know the nutrients that are in the water. We want to know if those nutrient levels are excessive and they're causing issues like eutrophication. We want to know the E. coli levels, but even to go further than that, it's not even always enough to know, is there excessive E. coli in the water? Where's that coming from? We can actually, partner with labs to figure out some source tracking. Is it animal? Is it bovine? Is it human sources of E. coli? Ottawa County, it's developing fast. We have some urban areas, but we have a lot of rural areas too. You guys actually talked about the time of sale and some septic issues earlier, but we have a lot of failed septic systems. I could tell you some horrifying stories from my experiences the last few years, but we can do source tracking and see if in certain areas, certain tributaries, if there's human sources of that E. coli. Are there failed septic systems, sewer system issues? So it's kind of just that whole concept of, we want to answer that question, what's in the water? I think that's a question that a lot of the public would like to know too. And so that's kind of what we're here for. That's the whole goal of this. So.
I know I'm kind of an action-oriented person. So it's like we spend so much time monitoring things, and I appreciate that this hasn't been monitored to the degree that you're discussing right now, but it's like the do as well.
Yep.
Because I may have seen salt go into kind of a critical marshland in our area, and it's not bad people. It's just, we don't have the right practices in place. So.
And I think that's the end goal too. So the action is kind of where our conservation district comes into. So a lot of the work that I've done in the last 8 years has been through 319 non-point source grants that we get from the state, other grants from federal government, other grants from, private entities as well to do implementation of best management practices. That's a big part of my job. I work with farmers throughout the whole county to do things like cover crops, reduce tillage, all these sort of agricultural BMPs to reduce those non-pollutant loadings. And this data would be I can't even explain how helpful it would be to securing grants in the future. Every time we apply for a grant, we have to show to the state, to the federal government, hey, we're applying for watersheds that are impaired. We know it's impaired. We have the data to show that. And we just have a lot of gaps in the knowledge. So there's a lot of watersheds that right now in the county aren't even eligible for funding. But by doing a project like this, we can bring them up to eligibility and we can really leverage that for a lot of future funding. The other thing too is if we were to receive funding from the county, that's not state or federal funding, so it could be counted as match too. So every grant we apply for, typically has a match component. And in the future, over the next 5 years, we could, every time we apply for a grant, we could have that match component completely done prior to even writing it. So I think they go hand in hand. The action is definitely the follow-up and where we're trying to go with this.
We are known for our water, definitely. Yeah, and our beautiful environment. So anything we can do to preserve it. Have any questions, Commissioner Moss?
Sure. Question for Joe. And if this is a topics for another meeting, totally fine. I know we're getting a little late. Are there any other uses for some of that funding that you want to talk about? Is that maybe coming up in future meetings?
That will be coming up in future meetings.
Sounds good.
We're just going to bite off one piece at a time.
Sounds good.
And this is a 5-year plan that I'm looking at. So if it was $1 million, that was kind of what I put out there. It's a 5-year monitoring plan for 5 years. It's because you got to get a snap. I don't want to take a 1 year and get a snapshot. You need a 5-year plan. And then what do you do with that information? Again, this isn't for testing for PFOS. This has nothing to do with that. This isn't looking for a point source to go point fingers. We do not do that. We're here to find solutions and make sure that our water is good water quality. And I'm happy to work with Jack Jordan. Him and I spoke some other times about this, and administration. I did have discussions with administration in the past. Who is no longer here. So I'm happy to share with Jack and I to even have more dialogue with Joe and Gretchen.
So so the private sector works differently, I think, than the governmental sector. So are you anticipating like you need the funds and then the plan, or the plan and then the funds?
Well, we already kind of have a plan already kind of put together.
Okay.
Yeah. We've always been working on that plan. I've been doing this 12 years. We're always trying to figure out under the drain code and under my jurisdiction now, I can't really do water monitoring. So we're looking at opportunities from a revenue source of this lawsuit to take that to the next level. Because right now we're not spending taxpayers' dollars on monitoring, and we would not be spending taxpayers' money on monitoring.
Monsanto.
It's a lawsuit case, if that makes sense. So.
Commissioner Belknap?
Just curious, Commissioner Bush, if we have any partnerships outside of the boundaries of Ottawa County, because a lot of our water is influenced by what happens outside of Ottawa
absolutely.
County. Yep. And I would not want to have any hindrance of the work if, some of this would require partnering, beyond our border to a degree.
Elgro would be one of our bigger partners as well. Kelly Goward, who is here, was with the Ottawa Area Coordinating Council for many years. She was a watershed technician over there. We also partner. We got a lot of partners, but the other one would be Elgro, or the Lower Grand, and all those partners. I mean, it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And when we talk about water, the testing, we'd be using it through the Annis Water Institute, and Hope College would be doing a lot of our water testing because that's what they do in their labs, and they're very good at it. So.
And this is just it's because I've seen something. So do we test for sodium content in the water when we're doing the testing, or is it just strictly like for E. coli organisms?
It's usually
not regularly, no.
Okay. Curiosity. All right.
I'm happy to take any other questions. I know for the sake of time.
Further. Yeah, further questions? Seeing none?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, and last on the agenda is public comment. Again, please address all your comments to the chair. You have approximately 3 minutes. Let us know what jurisdiction you live within.
Name is David Moore in Allendale Township. I come from work here because I was watching on YouTube and got a little burr under my saddle. I'm gonna back up a minute because there's two new things on the agenda. First of all, this deal with the water resource. I look at it and I go, I have nothing but respect for Mr. Bush, but I also see it could be used as a double-edged sword. A tool can be used something to beat over someone's head, or it can be used to help assist someone in making things better. I have great caution and concern about where that's going. Respect. The second thing is the ARPA funds. You heard there's $4 million, just over $4 million. How convenient. That's exactly what it costs the county to give $5,000 to every employee. Here's your opportunity to follow loose the previous board and pass that $5,000 to each employee and gain some loyalties and who knows what else. I'm sorry, that's sarcasm. I hope you understand that. Now to the real reason I'm here. I didn't change my clothes because I didn't want to miss the meeting. Okay, sorry, but that's how it is in life and I'm not happy. Without item 6 on your agenda, adding to the environmental health personnel. How convenient. Today I sent in my $345 to have a water and septic inspection done for real estate transfer. That's what you charge. You asked your people and they couldn't give you a definite number. It was somewhere between $250 and $350. Yeah, I was listening. Okay, I'm telling you it's $345 for a real estate transfer. Is there any questions? I can do that job. All right, yeah, I'm not happy. But that's if you want the 13-day delivery that they're talking about. Okay, you can spend another $250 to get a 5-day expedited delivery. Are you following me? So now we're at $600, right? I called to find out what private parties charge. Okay, it's $300 next day service. So you as a county are charging 200% more for a 5-day delivery, and they can do it in 1 day. And I don't believe a county is supposed to compete with private parties. That's not what the United States is about. But we've discussed that. And it goes back to, you want to know how $1 trillion is spent? $60 million to every 83 counties in the state of Michigan. That's how it's spent. And this goes back to what I've said before to this board. Your broadband decision. That's for the private individuals. It's not for the county. Housing is for the private people, not for the county. If you're going to do it on a government agency, like Mr. Jordan said, who owns it? And then what are your requirements? Are you building these nice, wonderful complexes that are built according to the specs of the planning commission? Or are you putting up a whole building that is capable of housing and providing heat and shelter for people so that they can survive until they can do better? The whole system needs to be readdressed. Thank you.
Thank you. Public comment? Any additional public comment? Once, twice, 3 times? All right. Thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.